first intense air and artillery strikes in Gaza today as the Israeli military pounded the Strip with the fiercest strikes in its 75-year conflict with the Palestinians. Entire districts of Gaza have been completely destroyed, despite a threat by Hamas militants to execute dozens of captive Israelis. Armed factions like Hezbollah in Lebanon are firing rockets into Israel from the north as Hamas continues its fight from Gaza, increasing fears that this war will escalate further. The increasing bloodshed coming as another Canadian has been identified as a victim of Hamas's surprise attack on Saturday. Hamas rockets rained down on Israel's southern port city of Ashkelon after the terrorist group gave residents a deadline to evacuate. The rockets striking targets in the city over and over. Hamas saying it's in retaliation for the nearly 200,000 people displaced within Gaza. The barrage continuing into the night, Israel's Iron Dome air defense system destroying many of the missiles in the skies above the city.
This was an act of sheer evil. More than 1,000 civilians slaughtered. Not just killed, slaughtered.
U.S. President Joe Biden condemning Hamas's attack in no uncertain terms, pledging his nation's support for Israel today.
We're surging additional military assistance, including ammunition and interceptors, to replenish Iron Dome. We're going to make sure that Israel does not run out of these critical assets.
It's very reassuring to know that the U.S. military is here just in case.
Jason Jungreis and his family are hunkered down in Tel Aviv, a city that was hit with rocket strikes on Saturday, but since then has been relatively safe.
A lot of what's been happening here in my neighborhood since has been people gathering things to send down to people in the south that were under siege to now, in the last 2 days, 650,000 reserve soldiers have been called in, and these are my friends and their fathers with small children and their, people with careers that are just dropping what they do and go to fight.
The roar of warplanes can be heard over Gaza as Israeli strikes flattened entire neighborhoods, killing civilians and compounding the dire humanitarian situation. The UN World Food Program has launched an emergency program to feed 800,000 people in Gaza and in the West Bank. The devastation leaving families with nowhere to go and nothing left.
What's happening is crazy. The situation is crazy. Literally no place is safe. Me personally, I've evacuated 3 times since yesterday.
New details about the initial Hamas attack on Saturday are emerging as the Israeli military took media through Kfar Azar, one of the hardest hit areas in southern Israel. An Israeli general saying in this village, babies were killed in their bedrooms.
You see the babies, the mother, the fathers in the bedrooms, in the protection rooms, and how the terrorists kill them. It's not a war, it's not a battlefield. It's a massacre.
The bloodshed on Saturday now believed to have claimed a second Canadian as well. BC man Ben Mizrachi was at the music festival in southern Israel where Hamas gunmen massacred 260 people. 2 Canadians have now died and 3 more are missing as the feds are considering evacuating Canadians stuck in Israel. For more on the war, I'm joined by James Gelvin, a professor of Middle Eastern history at the University of California, Los Angeles. James, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
How does the magnitude of the Hamas attack on Saturday compare to previous attacks on Israel?
It's much, much larger than anything that Hamas has done in the past. It's actually much larger than anything Hezbollah from Lebanon has done in the past also. There's never been a situation in which, for example, you would end up with 900 Israeli casualties, 150 hostages, and large numbers of people who have been displaced. So basically, this is something that's unprecedented in history. And this is also the first time since 1973 that battle itself has involved Israel's soil directly.
Do you think the recent political turmoil in Israel played a role in Hamas's ability to stage this surprise attack?
Yes, the Israeli population is split, mainly on the issues of judicial reform that Netanyahu wants to push through. It's an extraordinarily right-wing government. It's an extraordinarily religious government as well. The Palestinians, for example, have given up any hope that settlement activity is going to cease. They've given up any hope that there is going to be any initiative on the part of the Israelis, or at least acquiescence to some form of Palestinian sovereignty. So a combination of Israeli weakness, or perceived weakness, let's put it that way, and also the lack of a viable future for the Palestinian cause certainly fed into it. Now, I don't think that that was the only reason, but I also think that it was an ideal opportunity for this to arise.
Do you think recent American moves to normalize relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia played a role too?
And one thing that's made this even more complex is the shift in the nature of the conflict that's taking place during the Trump administration. From 1948 to 1993, the conflict was between states. In other words, the Palestinian issue was there, but most of the world chose to look at the issue as one that involved Israel versus the Egyptians, Israel versus the Syrians, Israel versus the Jordanians. And the idea was making peace between those two groups, those states, would bring about a real peace. In 1993, the whole paradigm shifted. And that paradigm has been, since 1993, that the only way to bring about a real peace is between Israelis and Palestinians. Starting with the Trump administration, with the Abraham Accords, the idea was, we'll go back to the drawing board, we'll go back to the 1948-1993 period, we'll try to get the dealing between various states, we'll pay lip service to resolving the Palestinian issue. Palestinians obviously don't appreciate that, and this is very likely one of the reasons for what has occurred in the past week or so. The movement for normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel that the Americans are pushing is something that would leave Palestinian national aspirations in its wake. And that means that basically the Palestinians feel that they have nothing to lose by launching some sort of situation like they've done in the last year or so.
Israel has promised the airstrikes are just the start. What do you think could come next?
Here's a problem that the Israelis have. The Israelis today said that they were going to launch attacks that are bigger than before and more powerful than before. In other words, what they're contemplating is a quantitative change, a quantitative switch, as opposed to a qualitative change and a qualitative switch. Now, in the past, their bombing of Gaza obviously has not worked. There is no deterrence at the present time. No deterrence against Hamas, no deterrence against Hezbollah. Deterrence works for the Israelis in terms of nation states that might confront, for example, a deterrence with Iran, but not with these various groups that are prepared to have the Israelis counter-strike when they do strike. So the Israelis are going to have to figure out some other means of dealing with a situation like this, because Hamas and Hezbollah in the north are also capable of continuing year after year after the Israelis have launched decisive attacks against their strongmen.
That's James Gelvin, a professor of Middle Eastern history at the University of California, Los Angeles. James, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.